Hello and welcome to the third module of the Digital Literacy course. In this module, we will explore the definition of what is a reliable source. A reliable source is one that provides a thorough, well-reasoned theory, argument, discussion based on strong evidence. Websites and blogs can be reliable or unreliable, hoaxes or sincere misinformation. Researchers and other experts often use blogs as a way to share their knowledge with the general public, but anyone with computer access can do so too. Magazine articles, books, and newspapers articles from well-established newspapers are for a general audience by authors or journalists who have consulted reliable sources and vetted through an editor. These sources may provide some of their articles online for free. Trade or professional articles or books are written by practitioners in a field to impart practice-oriented information. And then Wikipedia. Some entries in Wikipedia are reliable, some are not. It's up to you to evaluate. The authors are anonymous in Wikipedia, so there is no way to determine their expertise or the expertise of the Wikipedia editor who oversees the entry. Wikipedia editors will post warnings if they think the entry has weaknesses. But who decides that a source is reliable? The experts generally that read, critique, and recommend. They can publish as it is or publish with revisions that can be major or minor, or they could also choose not to publish. And also there is the editorial review, where the editors are experienced practitioners or journalists, and these editorial reviews are used by magazines for a general audience, professional or trade magazines for practitioners in a field, and professional newspapers that can be print or online. To determine the reliability of the source, ask yourself these questions. Who is the author and are they credible? Does the source have an author or is it written anonymously? If the author is an organization, can you find other reputable sources that treat it as a reliable entity? Does the organization provide a description of their mission and purpose? Do they list staff and board members and irrelevant credentials? If the author is a person, do they present verifiable credentials, researcher in a think tank, for example, or professors at universities? Have they published their work in reputable journals or magazines? Have other authors written about this author's works, or have they cited this author's work in other journals, for example? Are they affiliated with organizations that can be considered reputable? These are all fundamental questions to realize the reliability of the source. Another topic is if the content is substantial and supported by evidence. So does the source go into reasonable depth? Are there so many ads on the page that they overwhelm the content? Are facts and statistics footnoted where necessary? Are their footnoted sources reliable? Is the site trying to sell you something? If they advocate position, do they provide evidence to support it? Another thing that is important to verify is how current is the info. So does the content seem out of date? When was the web page last updated? Are sources cited also current? Are its links live or broken? It's important to remember that you can't fact check everything you read or hear, but if a statement sounds too good bad, or strange to be true, start digging. The first step when you start digging could be to see if a non-partisan fact-checking organization has already examined the statement. So some non-partisan fact-checking websites are the Duke Reporters Lab from the Duke University. Their fact-checking database links to over 100 non-partisan organizations around the world that assess the accuracy of statements made by public officials, political parties, candidates, journalists, new organizations, and so on. And it includes several dozen fact-checking sites also in the US. Also, there is the EU versus Disinfo, which is a site from the European Union that is created to challenge disinformation coming out of Russia. And then there is also Full Fact. There is a non-profit independent fact-checking organization based in the UK. The National Endowment for Democracy defined fake news as misleading content found on the internet, especially on social media. Much of this content is produced by for-profit websites and Facebook pages, gaming the platform for advertising revenue, and distinguish it from disinformation, because fake news does not meet the definition of disinformation or propaganda. Its motives are usually financial, not political, and it is usually not tied to a larger agenda. In 2017, the inventor of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, claimed that fake news was one of the three most significant new disturbing internet trends that must first be resolved if the internet is to be capable of truly serving humanity. The other two new disturbing trends were the recent surge in the use of the internet by governments for citizen surveillance purposes and for cyber warfare purposes. Claire Wardle of First Draft News has identified 7 types of fake news, which are the satire or parody, that has no intention to cause harm but has potential to fool. The second one is the false connection, when headlines, visuals, or captions do not support the content. The third one is misleading content, where there is a misleading use of information to frame an issue or an individual. The fourth one is false context, when genuine content is shared with false contextual information. The fifth one is impostor content, when genuine sources are impersonated with false made-up sources. The sixth one is manipulated content, when genuine information or imagery is manipulated to deceive, as with a doctored photo. And the last one is the fabricated content. That is new content, so it's 100% false and is designed to deceive and do harm. Scientific denialism is another potential explanatory type of fake news, defined as the act of producing false or misleading facts to unconsciously support strong pre-existing beliefs. For example, a scientific denialism is what some think happened or not happened, which is the denial of the Holocaust. However, recent reviews of fake news still regard it as a useful broad construct, equivalent in meaning to fabricated news, as separate from related types of problematic news content, such as hyperpartisan news, this latter being a particular source of political polarization. Therefore, researchers are beginning to favor information disorder as a more neutral term that is informative. Critical media literacy education, as we mentioned also in one of the previous modules, focused on teaching students how to detect fake news. And it was effective because it was a way for mitigating the influence of propaganda. In his book, The Anatomy of Fake News, A Critical News Education, Higdon offers a 10-step guide for detecting fake news. When identifying a source of information, one must look at many attributes, including but not limited to the content of the email and social media engagements. Specifically, the language is typically more inflammatory in fake news than real articles, in part because the purpose is to confuse and generate clicks. Regulation of social media. Internet companies with threatened credibility have developed new responses to limit fake news and reduce financial incentives for its proliferation. A valid criticism of social media companies is that users are presented with content that they will like based on previous viewing preferences. An undesirable side effect is that confirmation bias is enhanced in users, which in turn enhances the acceptance of fake news. To reduce this bias, effective self-regulation and legally enforced regulation of social media, notably on Facebook and Twitter, and web search engines such as Google, need to become more effective and innovative. Media scholar Nolan Higdon argues that relying on tech companies to solve issues with false information will exacerbate the problem. Tech companies lack an incentive for solving the problem because they benefit financially from the proliferation of fake news. Their utilization of data collected is one of the strongest forces empowering fake news producers. Rather than government regulation or industry censorship, Higdon argues for the introduction of critical news literacy education to American education. Financial disincentives to tackle fake news also apply to some mainstream media. From this graph, we can see that in 2021, 37% of all people aged 16-74 years in the EU saw untrue or doubtful information on news, websites, or social media during the 3 months prior to the survey. However, only around a quarter, which corresponds to 23% of people, verified the truthfulness of the information or content. In 2018, the European Commission introduced the first voluntary code of practice on disinformation. In 2022, this became a strengthened co-regulation scheme with responsibility shared between the regulators and companies signatories to the code. It complemented the earlier Digital Services Act that was agreed by the 27 countries of the EU, which already included a section on combating disinformation.